Good afternoon. If you can find your seats, we're going to get started. Welcome. My name is Colleen Burns. I'm on the education team at Urban Green, and I manage our Energy Code and G-Pro trainings. Education is one of the key ways we advance our mission, and so we're thrilled to have you here today at our annual conference. I'll be your MC for today. Urban Green values excellence, inclusion, collaboration, and engagement, and we invite you to be mindful of these values throughout the program. We have a few quick items to review before we get started. First, if you haven't connected to the Wi-Fi yet, you can find this information on this slide. You can take a quick picture of it so you can have it ready. Throughout the program today, we will also be using a platform called Slido to take your questions. You can connect at slido.com, and you can use the code UGC to sign in. We will use the same code for all 3 sessions, and you can submit your questions as they come to you, and you can actually upvote other people's questions that you find interesting. Our moderators will be monitoring the Slido and be prioritizing the questions with the most upvotes. Finally, if you hear something interesting, please feel free to share it on social media and tag us and our speakers. Our Twitter handles are in the program. I think we're ready to get started, so I'd like to invite to the stage Cecil Scheib, former UGC staff member, current board member, and NYU's Chief Sustainability Officer.
Thank you so much. Welcome to another great conference here at NYU. You know, when I was at Urban Green, we used to have a saying, which is that the best day to talk about green building is the day that you can see the buildings from the other side of the street. It was almost always true. But now that we can see our buildings once again, it really is a great day to talk about them. Here at NYU, we are trying to live these values that we're going to talk about today. We know that not only are buildings more than 99% of our on-site climate footprint here, but that we spend more than 90% of our time indoors. And so to have a healthy, happy, and successful community, we not only need to reach our climate goals, but we need to make our buildings better at the same time. We've done a lot. We have reduced our carbon 30%, which is the equivalent of planting all of Brooklyn and all of Manhattan in forest. We're on track for a net 50% reduction by the year 2025 and to be carbon neutral by 2040. And that's great, but we still have so much more to learn. So I'm thrilled to have the amazing speakers here today. And I'm going to turn things right over to welcoming John Mandyke, CEO of Urban Green Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecil. Thank you, and welcome to everybody. We're thrilled that you've joined us today for our annual conference. Very exciting to see all of you. You know, our friend Rit Agarwala, the Chief Climate Officer for the City of New York and a Urban Green Board alum, said something that stuck with me on Earth Day this year. He said 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, we read about climate change in really thick IPCC UN reports. Today we read about climate change in the morning weather report. Especially this morning, especially the last 2 mornings, which gives testament to why we are here and the mission that we're on and the work that is ahead for us. We know buildings are the problem for climate change in New York City, representing 70% of our emissions. That means buildings are our solution. And that's what gives me hope, and I hope it gives you hope. And if you have to ask, looking through orange air, am I on Mars or Manhattan? Buildings are our refuge when it comes to climate resiliency. And so that's why I'm excited for the discussions we're going to have today. We're going to dive into 3 trends that will change sustainability in buildings going forward in our city. And we have an all-star lineup of speakers to help us do that. Now, events like this don't happen by themselves. We have a lot of strong supporters that have made today possible, and I want to thank 3 of them. Our lead sponsor today for today's event is Carrier Corporation. Let's give Carrier a round of applause, please. Our supporting sponsor is Equinor. Let's give them a big round of applause. And of course, our host sponsor, NYU. Cecil, thank you so much. Now, one bit of housekeeping. Who was here in 2019? Raise your hand. You'll remember what? The fire alarm. The fire alarm. If there is a fire alarm, we will stay in this room and await instructions from NYU officials. So just keep that in mind. So let's get started with our keynote today, which is going to take the form of a fireside chat, and I'm really, really honored to introduce Doreen Harris as our keynote. Doreen was appointed president and CEO of NYSERDA in April 2021, just finishing a 2-year anniversary. 2-year anniversary, after serving as acting president and CEO since June of 2020. Under her leadership, NYSERDA is making big progress on nation-leading initiatives, including clean energy infrastructure, as we know, large-scale renewables, building decarbonization, clean fuels, energy storage, and so much more. They've been a terrific partner to work with at Urban Green, and actually a leader across our nation in what they do. She joined NYSERDA in 2010 and served as Vice President of Large-Scale Renewables, where she spearheaded the strategic development of New York's land-based renewable program and also our offshore wind resources. And if that's not enough, she's a chemist. She's a chemist with a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from the University of Rochester with an MBA from the University of Albany. So please welcome Doreen to the stage. All right.
There we go.
Thank you,
Thank
Doreen.
you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, lots going on with the state. So let's dive right in. So the state budget just passed a couple weeks ago with big policies for decarbonization. So congratulations on that. Let's start with the nation's first state law for all new electric buildings. What an amazing accomplishment. Congratulations. How do you see that rolling out?
Yeah, this year's executive budget was, in my view, a true reason to celebrate because it really set forth, I'd say, what we're doing across the state, which is implementing our climate law. We've spent a number of years with our Climate Action Council and really being ready for the moment in which we can say, what does it take to get from here to there? We know what it takes. We passed the scoping plan at the end of the last year, and now we're heavy into the world of implementation. And as a Climate Action Council, we recognize the fact, to your point, that buildings are the greatest, perhaps the greatest challenge. I'd say they are the biggest challenge, but also a massive opportunity for our state, really, to not only address statewide what is the largest source of emissions, but also to really lead along that path toward realizing the objective of those decarbonized buildings. So this year's executive budget included what I would say is a game changer for the state of New York because it sets the path on a statewide basis to realize zero emission new construction, first in lower rise under 7-story buildings, and then later in the decade in the higher rise buildings. And I say this because it will take us some time to actually implement this. To your question, it's a game changer to think about this for new construction, but we will need to be working with our code council and ultimately advancing this through code cycles and various processes with the Department of State here on a statewide basis. And I'd say, you know, this is how you do the work. We all know this from the city perspective, notably with Local 197 and 154, where we understand what it takes, but now we're going to be zooming out on a statewide basis and getting hard at work on addressing that source. So more to come. We'll continue that march. There's more progress to be made, but extraordinarily proud, and specifically of the governor's leadership, to not only advance that requirement, but to put major budget against it as well. The budget included multiple hundreds of millions of dollars for investments in buildings as well, which is to be noted, not only through expanding our Empower program, but also to make sure that bills can stay affordable, electricity bills can stay affordable for New Yorkers at the same time. So a lot in that budget for buildings. You got to feel good about that.
Yeah,
state buildings included, by the way. There's a pretty big one on studying state-owned buildings because we do need to really practice what we preach on a statewide basis and as state entities as well.
So the budget also included and passed this Cap and Invest program,
Yeah.
which is kind of a new concept. So maybe you can help unpack, what is Cap and Invest and how do you see that rolling out for the state?
Yeah, so one of the objectives of New York's Climate Action Council was to look at what we called economy-wide solutions to realize the goals of the Climate Act. And that is exactly what a Cap and Invest program is. We had a serious debate over the best way to effectuate those emissions reductions in the climate law. And as such, this program really emerged as the best way to both cap emissions, but also to invest the revenues from auctions of allowances toward the solutions that we seek. And so as we speak, we are working with the Department of Environmental Conservation to advance the rulemaking process to realize the Cap and Invest program. That'll be occurring over the course of this year. In fact, there's a number of workshops that are going on virtually. Might have even been today. Literally on a weekly basis, we have workshops because we're really needing to learn from others as we advance the rulemaking process this year. And so I'd say the couple principles around Cap and Invest. One of them is the topic of affordability. And within the state budget, there was a major consideration of that topic of affordability, in that there is going to be an account, a fund that is established to ensure that refunds are made, rebates, and essentially money is put back into the pockets of New Yorkers so as to ensure that the program can be affordable across the state, as well as for small businesses and small commercial and industrial users. So that's an important part, and that was something advanced with the legislature, and I think that's an important principle for the governor. And as we advance this year through the rulemaking process, we'll be looking hard at other ways that we can make this program affordable. Because cost is a real issue. We'll probably talk about this at some point, but in the near term particularly, we have a lot of challenges on the horizon on the topic of cost. And ensuring that we can get these programs moving in that affordable manner is going to be central. The other part, though, about Cap and Invest I think that is important is we're going to be looking hard over the course of this rulemaking process as to how this can intersect with Local Law 97 as an example of programs that should work in concert with one another and be self-reinforcing but not duplicative with respect to their intentions. So Cap and Invest will be largely affecting the suppliers of fuels as opposed to the buildings themselves, such that the ways in which this will be enforced, or at least considered to be enforced, would impact not the direct building owners as much as, for example, the suppliers like Con Edison or the like. And really looking at ways that Cap and Invest program can actually be designed in ways that benefit those building owners that are making those investments to decarbonize their buildings. In theory, it should be very beneficial because there will be less fossil fuel use and therefore fewer emissions to cap. So this is just, it's going to be a process. We don't have all of the answers. It's going to play out over a series of what will likely be years. But the fact that we as a state are taking this on, I would say, is getting attention. There's programs on the West Coast in Canada, nothing on the East Coast in this realm, and it's great to see other states really develop increasing interest in it as well.
Great. So we're going to be talking a lot about building decarbonization today, and that goes hand in glove with the greening of the grid.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So can you bring us up to speed on where the state is with your clean energy development program?
Sure, yeah. So one of the analyses that we conducted as part of the Climate Action Council really looked at what will be happening to the state's electric load over the course of the coming decades as we head past 2030 into 2040 and ultimately into 2050. And And really the headlines are due to our heavy reliance on electrification for buildings and transport, but also because of the load growth that we expect to see due to the attraction of businesses and of course the economy that will be growing at the same time. We're going to see a rough doubling of our electric load in that period. And as such, when we look at goals within the climate law, like 70% by 2030 or 100% zero emission by 2040, that means that denominator is going to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So we need to be planning for that. And that's one of NYSERDA's primary responsibilities, is to ensure that we have a pipeline and a build out of clean energy projects that is commensurate with that need. So this is a process that is certainly underway. It's something we plan for. But I would say it is a particularly challenging time to build renewables. Just yesterday, we saw a series of petitions to the New York Public Service Commission by the large-scale renewable generators, wind, solar, offshore wind, notably, really all saying collectively that there were economic challenges that they were facing in advancing their projects in a feasible manner. And that comes as no surprise to us. Anyone working in this market knows that inflation and supply chain and interest rates have all come together in ways that create real economic challenges for any building you're doing, much less multi-billion-dollar projects. And so that's before the commission. They'll have to take it up and consider it, but I would say it means to me that it's confirmation that it is not necessarily going to be a straight line from here to there, that we're going to have challenges along the way. And ultimately, we as a state are significantly and highly motivated to meet these goals and indicative of our interest in working with the industry to realize them. But it's going to be a massive build-out of all sorts of technologies.
And will most of that be offshore wind? Like, we have big projects that are underway right now being planned, but is that where the future is really going to be?
Well, offshore wind is truly a game changer for the state. It is. It's one of the major reasons that we can achieve these goals with the load expansion that I was just talking about. Just as a frame of reference, our 9 gigawatt goal has the potential maybe to serve about 30% of the state's electric load in 2035. So it's a big deal, but it is not the only resource by a long shot. We have 2 major transmission projects under development and construction that will serve the city. Those are equally important to really get at this city-focused decarbonization need. And then importantly, the Public Service Commission actually just opened a proceeding looking at the topic of 100% zero emission resources by 2040. And so through that proceeding, we'll be looking at resources like nuclear. How much will nuclear contribute to that future, including new technologies, the advanced technologies for nuclear? What is the future of clean fuels? Hydrogen is the penultimate and ultimate example that people like to use all the time. But these are important questions as well, because it is not just a renewable goal that we have, it's a zero emission goal as well.
So I'll switch topics a little bit. NYSERDA plays such a big role in technology development and demonstration, which is really needed. What are some of the technologies you're seeing and available today or in the near future that make you most excited about decarbonization?
Oh, I don't know where to start. That's a good question. Technology is literally the way in which we get from here to there. And ultimately, the way in which we can legitimately and seriously take on that point, which is we're not just talking about a decarbonized future, we're talking about a better future, a future which is not only healthier, but reflects the fact that there's solutions that are being brought to bear that are creative, innovative, again, make life better for all of us. NYSERDA has an innovation team that has been working hard over decades. In fact, R&D is in our name, so that's how we really started. And there's some technologies that are being advanced that are so consistent with that objective. A great example would be a challenge that we put forth in concert with the New York Power Authority and NYCHA to develop a heat pump technology that would work effectively in NYCHA housing, which is specific to the needs of very simple installation, can plug into an outlet on the wall, and ultimately be installed in the order of an hour or less, and then provide not only the heating but the cooling in these households that really will produce a much better quality of life for them, but a solution that is simple and replicable and scalable that can be used across the properties. And so that would be a great example of like a really cool solution that came out of our innovation team, but through which, by partnerships, we achieved far more than an innovation solution. It's a scalable, replicable, and ultimately, I'd say, significant benefit for the occupants. But the list literally goes on. And really, when we have teams like our Tech to Market team, that's what they're there to do, is to bring these cool technologies to the fore and networks to allow them to thrive here in the state as well.
So we talk a lot about policies and what needs to be done, but it's also good to remember that actually somebody has to do the work, and often that's skilled labor. So where would you like to see workforce training go to support decarbonization?
Well, when you talk about workforce, it is, first of all, the reality that we are going to need so many clean energy workers across our economy. Roughly speaking, we have 160,000 plus clean energy workers in the state now. The numbers are easily going to double. And I would contend that when we all sit here in 2050, I don't know that I'll be here in 2050, but whenever someone's sitting here in 2050, I would say that our entire economy is shifting in a way that so many workers become clean energy or climate workers that the sort of lines begin to blur over these decades. And so the question really becomes, how do we scale up not only technologies and solutions, but the people to actually meet that need? And certainly at NYSERDA, we have a significant series of programs to bring not only the workforce forward, but centrally to the Climate Act, to do so in a way that is bringing in folks who might not otherwise consider themselves potential members of the workforce. And so we do that certainly in underserved communities around our state by providing services like wraparound services that can be helpful for folks to really get the training they need to enter that workforce. But at the end of the day, when we look at where the working workforce will be needed most, I'm at Urban Green, so I was going to say this. It's in the building sector, full stop. The vast majority of the workers are in this sector, and it's where the jobs are going to be. And when we look at how we're going to be investing, it is notable that more and more we expect that these investments will occur in ways in which we're utilizing labor standards throughout the investments that we're making. I think it's notable, for as example, in this year's budget, the Cap and Invest program that was advanced through the legislature includes significant labor provisions, consideration of prevailing wage, labor peace agreements, Buy American provisions, et cetera, that reflect the fact that we really see this moving forward in a way that expands our partnerships with labor and ultimately the programs that are needed to build that workforce at the same time.
So you got so much done this year, but we know the work's not over. So what's next? What's next from a priority standpoint or initiative standpoint?
Yeah, I'd say one thing we're spending a lot of time on, and I'm sure many of you are as well at NYSERDA, is really how to maximize the leverage of our investments. So certainly we spend a lot of time tracking federal investments right now, how we can maximize our dollars for far more impact by utilizing federal leverage to the maximum extent possible. We had submitted, as an example of this, an application to the Federal Department of Energy to host a hydrogen hub here in the U.S. Northeast. And we did so on behalf of actually 7 states total and a number of different partners. And I would say that's reflective of what we're doing here at scale, is we're saying, yes, we're the foundation of this proposal, but we're going to use others, money, state leverage, private sector leverage, and we would hope federal leverage to really create a thriving hydrogen ecosystem here as an example. The other thing, though, I'd say relevant to this group, and I hope everyone is paying attention to it, there's a Public Service Commission proceeding underway now reviewing the new Efficiency New York programs, and in part, the Clean Energy Fund at NYSERDA that really funds many of our investments in the building space. It's one to pay attention to. This is a big deal because the Clean Energy Fund that really funds our investments is sunsetting in a fairly short period of time. And in the interim, we passed the climate law. So certainly it necessitates a major relook at how these programs function in the light of the scale that we're trying to achieve. We know that Cap and Invest is something that we're working toward in parallel, but we also know Cap and Invest isn't going to be available in the next handful of years. So we need to be doing something in the meantime to really scale up our impact and our investments in this sector. So I'd say this is an area we're spending a lot of time on. It's a big deal for buildings. It's a big deal for NYSERDA, but I'd say perhaps more importantly, it's a big deal for our climate law's achievement as well.
Great. Well, Doreen, we're so thrilled that you helped kick off our conference. Let's give Doreen a big round of applause.
Thank
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you.